Today I chose an appropriate setting, the People's Republic of China, to bring you a message that has grown dangerously out of fashion, which is that the world needs America. John McCain said we are the world's last best hope. People say we are the leaders of the free world, things like that. That idea has really fallen out of fashion, really with both sides. And I'd like to see it make a comeback. So on the Republican side, Trumpism has taken over, which is this idea that the enemy is Democrats, and they are so dangerous that even a president installed by Russia is preferable to their fellow citizens, Hillary Clinton. The Democrats are about the same way. You ask them, what are some threats? Is it China? Is it Russia? Is it ISIS? Not really. It's Ku Klux Klan and neo-Confederates. So we're at a stage where we think the enemy is really our fellow citizens and not so much the rest of the world. Americans don't like the idea of America even having a foreign policy. Sure, we're just going to go out there and wave our big dicks around and knock people over with our flag, and who are we to tell the world what to do, and why don't we just mind our own business? And you say, what should American foreign policy be to like a Bernie Sanders voter or like somebody in the far left or even somebody who really believes in identity politics? Well, all cultures are the same and we shouldn't have an influence, and it's just such white male privilege to think America should even be out there doing that. And the Trump people, ironically enough, are kind of on that page in a different way, which is that we've done too much for the world. We've been too generous. They think something like a quarter of our budget goes to foreign aid. It's not even 2 or 3%. So they think that we've basically done all this shit in the world that's just pure charity and people are mooching off of us, and we need to get away from that and back to America first. Of course, you ask the same people, do you want to rebuild our roads, our schools, our hospitals? No, not really. We just want a big giant tax cut that they don't really need, and then they can go buy their own shit with it. And in Mark Lilla's book, fantastic book, The Once and Future Liberal, he basically makes the case that Ronald Reagan, individual liberty, libertarianism, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's morning in America. That's why I'm doing morning in Shanghai. Basically, that is the mirror image of liberals focusing on identity politics, this sense of the self. You go to college not to learn about the world and your place in it and everybody else. It's to learn more about yourself and what your group has been through and how you identify your group and your struggle, and that's kind of all that matters. And what they're showing is that this sense of liberty and this sense of individualism has been so intertwined in both parties that we don't really even have a sense of civic duty or engagement or citizenship or patriotism or what that even means. All these people are upset about the NFL players taking a knee or whatever, but I didn't really hear anything about the Star Spangled Banner for the 10 years before that. That has triggered some type of intense patriotic backlash that really has not been there in terms of our foreign policy and how voters support that and how we think about it. The reason that the world needs America is because nature abhors a vacuum. And if we're not out there trying to take the place of world leaders, China or Russia are going to. Somebody is going to take our place, and they're going to try to instill their values, which are fascism and authoritarianism and dictatorships. Watching CNN International in China, if there's a story that they don't like, the screen will go black. And this is a somewhat westernized hotel watching an international channel, CNN, in English, that most Chinese citizens don't even have access to. So they're editing what even foreigners watch out of a threat, the perceived threat that may be. I made other videos about the influence of China in our media, our movies, our TV shows, what gets made, what doesn't, what gets a theatrical release. You're already seeing Russia try to influence our elections. As obviously the President of the United States, Donald Trump, who I do not believe truly won the Electoral College anymore, is president. You're going to see people exert their influence. China with our media, Russia with our politics, the rest of the world, such as Africa. Right now, they're taking a lot of bad deals from China to try to build these massive projects. They're going to become more and more indebted to China. China's basically going to become the new colonialist. So what England and France and Dutch and all these different countries have done to Africa over the years, now China's going to basically do it. But they're not going to do it with the military. They're not going to do it by invading and enslaving people. They're going to enslave them economically with a lot of debt that they can't pay back. And then these authoritarian regimes, take whatever you need, take our resources, just as long as you give me enough weapons that I can stay in power. That's becoming the new model all around the world. Russia's doing it with Assad, Iran to a lesser extent. They're getting a bigger foothold in Venezuela, and Maduro is basically becoming entirely dependent on Chinese and Russian money to stay in power. Citgo Gas is technically owned by Venezuela, which has so much debt that Russia, their old company Rosneft, may own a majority stake in Citgo Gas, an American company. Venezuela can't pay back any more of their loans, or they have to borrow any more money. Now, I don't think I really need to explain why having a Houston-based company under Russian control is a bad idea and how they could essentially shut down all of our Citgo gas stations, create a massive oil spike, all these different things that they could do to hurt our economy if they feel so inclined because of new economic sanctions. It's important that they don't get an economic foothold onto us so that they can't control our response to, say, global warming or, the Iran deal or something that we might want to have more leverage in. Now, people say, well, we put in puppet dictatorships all across Latin America, the Shah of Iran, for example, and, Guatemala, different places like that. But the world still needs us. Because right now we're looking at an unprecedented amount of dictatorships. Erdogan taking over Turkey, which has been the only majority Muslim country that had an elected democracy. Duarte in the Philippines, basically declaring a one-man war on drug cartels by killing 10,000 people. But he's also going to start killing political opponents and prisoners, just you watch, if he's not already doing it. The situation in Burma, the situation in Venezuela, Africa, and the Middle East have been dominated by dictators. Assad would rather basically level his entire country than step down. More and more the effects of Russia and China. All these countries, by the way, that I mentioned are getting a lot of money from Russia and China. Okay, China funded the genocide in Sudan. We think they may currently be funding the civil war in South Sudan. They are really behind a lot of the world's evils in terms of they want resources and they want a government that is more likely to give it to them. Basically what the American model used to be, if I'm being honest. When John McCain says we're the world's last best hope, I think he understands that if American democracy falls, the rest of the world is in such a precarious place that all of democracy may fall. Russia's ultimate goal is to reabsorb Ukraine, reabsorb all of the countries basically that used to make up the USSR and dominate again as the Soviet Union. China's goal is to basically have sole economic ownership of Africa and several of the other Asian nations around it basically. If we fall, there is no hope for democracy in the modern world. And that's why I think it's important to reestablish that sense of patriotism. All these squabbles amongst ourselves may seem very important right now, but if America falls and China and Russia and whoever else take over the world stage as their personal puppet, we're going to be a lot worse off than we are now, believe you me.